Okay, good morning. Today's daf is daf Lamed Gimel in Masechet Zevachim. Let me share my screen and we can really get started. So, yesterday we concluded with Ula making two different points. His first point in the name of Reish Lakish was that partial entry is like full entry, and therefore, and so, and in fact, the partial entry is considered like full entry, and anybody who is tameh and puts their hands inside the courtyard is going to get lashes, and that there's but not only lashes, but they may be in fact subject to kares. So that's what we saw yesterday, and then and so as a
Is that
result,
actually true? Well, isn't there a Kimle the Rabbi Mine? If he gets
no,
colored like
kares is not a subject to kimle derabbanan. We give lashes specifically for violations that are subject to kares, because it's not kares isn't punished by man. It's punished by God. So that's my recollection. So that's so no, there is no kimle derabbanan in connection with that. And then the second is the second point that
so it's only
Ula made.
mita b'dei
What?
mita b'dei adam mita b'dei beit din.
Yes, the meet the b'day beitin. Then you're absolutely right. That would be, of course, then we would say Kim Levi the Rabbamine.
Who's a famous rabbi?
We're right now talking about 2 points that Ula made. Ula made 1 point that if you stick your hands into something,
Yeah.
it's as if your whole body was in.
Wow.
That was point number one. And the second point was that even though we say that, we had this case of a mechusar kapara of a mitzora. That's somebody who had some kind of skin tsarat, skin disease that their body turned white, or some other color. In any event, the bottom line is that they were healed from it, and they went to the mikvah and and immersed in the mikvah, and they came out, and it was overnight already, and now they still need to bring a korban.
Wow.
But the problem is that they had some kind of nocturnal emission, and so as a result, it became tameh again. So they went to the mikvah, but now because they are a tvul yom, they're not allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash. So the question is, now let's say that all happens on Erev Pesach. We want this person who's going to become tahor at night to be able to participate in the Korban Pesach. And so we said that, so we asked the question, how is it possible that the rabbi said in a brisa that we allow this person to perform the ceremony and offer the sacrifices for a mitzora, even though it means sticking his hands into the azara, into the courtyard. And he's not allowed to go into the courtyard. Now he's not allowed to go into the courtyard for two reasons. Well, we allow him to go into the courtyard because he's a mitzora, because that's part of the purification process. But he's allowed to go into the courtyard even though he is a tvul yom of a Baal Keri. And so as a result, we explained that Ula says that once we allow the partial entry because he's a mechusar kapara mitzora, so we'll also allow the rabbis will allow him to enter even if he's also a tvul yom. Basically, the idea is that because we're allowing him something that he was originally prohibited to go in for, we'll still allow that same action, even though he's got an extra reason for not allowing it, namely that he's now also a Balkari. So we're going to refer to both of these teachings. We're going to start with that most recent teaching because Rav Yosef is going to say, hey, maybe we can imply something based on that teaching. So we're up to Amar Rav Yosef, 13th line from the bottom of Lamed Bet Amud Bet.
So he's
Amar-
only, this is only because of Erev Pesach. If this was Tuesday in December, they wouldn't allow it, right?
That's correct. If it was Tuesday in December, we would wait for him to be tahor the next day, so he would only be a mechus or kapara. And now he would be like every mitzorah that we allow him to stick his thumbs in, because part of the issue is that a balkari can't even go on Har Habayis, so he can't even get to technically he can't even get to the Shar Nicanor in order to stick his thumbs in, because he's not supposed to even go on Har Habayis, so he's not supposed to go through the Ezras Nashim, and so as a result, that's why we need to say that specifically we're going to allow him on this Erev Pesach. That's exactly right.
That's
So
a special exemption. Is there another exemption like this throughout the year? Another Chag or something? Is there or
not
not?
that I'm aware of. I don't think so. So we pick up 13th line, Amar of Yosef, end of the line. Amar of Yosef, Kasabar Ula, maybe Ula would say the following, Ruban Zavim. Imagine a world in which most of the Jewish people have had some kind of flow, some kind of emission that makes them a zav for if they're men, I guess zava if they're women, and naasu tamei mesim, and now they also become tamei mes. Now we know that if in fact a majority of the Jewish people are tamei mes, we say that that tuma is not going to prevent the entire community from bringing a korban pesach. But so do we now say Hoel v'hutru l'tumasan? Well, now once we say that it's mutter for them to bring a korban pesach because of the tuma of their of the tumas mace, hutru l'zivasan, we should also allow them to bring a korban pesach, even though they are a zav. So as we take a look in Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up in Rashi, Amar of Yosef, Shma mina Ula. We learn from Ula to Amar Hoel Ishtri Laha, that just because we permit it for this one, we're going to also permit it for that one. So we're going to learn that same concept right here. Ruban shel tzibor zavin, even though the majority of the community is now a zav, b'pesach, on Pesach, v'lo nidchas tumas ziva etzlan, and we do not, if all we had was the majority of the community being a zav, we would not allow them to offer the korban pesach. It is specifically that we're going to allow them to offer the korban pesach because they're tamei meis. V'nasu tamei meisim, but now they become tamei meis. Bo bayom, on that day, hoel v'hutru l'tumas hameis shenidcha etzlan hutru l'zivatan. Let's say that just because we're going to allow the tuma of the mace to allow everybody to offer korban pesach even though they're tamei meis, we'll also allow them to do it even though they're a zav. So Amar le Abaye, mi dummy, are these cases comparable? Tuma ishtari, ziva lo ishtari. No, the more recent one, this is how Rashi understands it. Take a look in Rashi. Tuma ishtari, we're going to allow them the tuma, shiba acharona. That came later. Ziva rishona, omedes bimkoma, but the original ziva that stood there is going to stay in its place. V'lo dami l'mitzorah. It's not comparable to the mitzorah case. Dahasam ikalamemer migo de kamaisa lo haviasira. That in the mitzorah case we say, well, look, what was he first? He was first the mitzorah, and we're allowing the mitzorah to go in. So because we're going to say that the thing that was first, we're not going to say is a prohibition. Lo haviasira lay basraisa, because of the more recent case of now him also becoming a balkari. So lo chamiralach, we're not going to be strict about it either. Mikamaisa, we're not going to make it any more strict than the first way. One shahare tame, that because he's already considered tame haya umutar, and therefore we're going to permit it. Aval hacha ki hava ziva gridata havu. The ziva is more basic. So havu asiri hashta de itu sofa tuma alaihu, because what got added to it was the tuma got added to it, and ishtarulahu, and it's only the tuma that got fixed. So as a result, we're going to be in a problem. So that's not comparable. So take out the words amarle. The Hagos Habach takes those out, because now in a classic Abaye, in trying to help his teacher Rav Yosef, who had forgotten a lot of his Torah, Dilma Hachi Kamarmar, this is what you meant to say. Ruban Tamei Mesim. We switched the order. First, they were all the Jewish people were Tamei Mace. And so as a result, we're going to allow them to bring the Korban Pesach. The Nasu Zavim. And now they all become Zavim. And now, Hoel v'hutrul l'tumasan, hutrul l'zivasan. And since we're now going to permit them to bring the Korban Pesach, because the first thing that they had is what we're permitting, we're going to also incorporate and include the permission associated with the being a Zav as well. Amrlay in Rav Yosef said, yes, that's what I meant. That's exactly the point. But Abaye says back, and again, Hagos Habach adds the Amrlay that we took out before. It adds it back here. But Amrlay, so Rav Aye responds, but Kasilo Dami, but still the cases aren't comparable. Mitzora Heterahu. When it comes to the Mitzora, it isn't actually a dichoy. It isn't a pushing off of it, but rather it's an absolute permission that we allow him to put his hands into the courtyard. Ho'ova ishtri, and so once we have an absolute permission, we'll apply that permission more broadly. Tuma dukuyahi, but when it comes to tuma of the entire community, the fact that we're allowing them to still bring a korban pesach doesn't undermine the nature of that tuma. They are still all tameh. It's not an absolute permission, but rather we're pushing it off. So maybe laha idcha, laha lo idcha. And for this one, they're going to push it off, and for the other one, they won't push it off. So Amrle Rava says back to Abaye, as is they often argue. Rava says back to Abaye, Adarabba, I can make the exact opposite argument. That ibcha mistabra, in fact, the opposite is more logical. Mitzora heterehu. When it comes to something where we're actually going to say it's absolutely permitted, so then laha ishtarai, ulaha lo ishtarai. Maybe we would say for this we're going to permit, for that we're not going to permit. After all, it's an absolute permission. So once you say that somebody can do something, it doesn't mean that they can also do something else, right? So batuma dechuyahu, but tuma isn't fully a full permission. We're just giving an excuse, and we're going to let you do this one little thing. So once we're going to let you do this one little thing, we'll let you do this one little thing no matter what. So mali chad dechuya, mali shtei dechuyas. What do I care if there's one thing that's being pushed off or two things that are being pushed off? So basically, we've now offered two different approaches to Ula's statement. Again, Ula says that because you're allowed to stick your thumb, ear, and big toe into the azara, if you're a mitzora that's mechus or kapara, so we'll also allow you a balkari who's a tvul yom. We'll also allow, even if it's the same person, we'll allow them on erev Pesach to also stick in their thumb, their ear, and their big toe, so that they can successfully go to them, become fully tahor, and be able to participate in the korban Pesach that night. But when it comes to Abaye, we won't extend that in any other circumstances. But according to Rava and Rav Yosef, no, we're going to extend it not only in the case that we just said, but even in the case where you have a majority of the community that was Tamei Mace and then becomes a Zav. This is not like a factual thing that ever happened, but it's a theoretical question that's being discussed. And if that theoretically were to happen, so then we would allow we would allow this the entire community to offer the Korban Pesach, because once we're going to permit the Korban Pesach for all the community because everybody is Tameh, the fact that they now also became a Zav, so Rav Yosef and Rava will say, yeah, once we're pushing off for this, we'll also push off for that.
But not the other way around. Not if they're all Zavim, and then
Correct.
it becomes
Not if they're all
Tumei.
Zavim. If they're all Zavim, then Rav Yosef would agree to Abaye's question and therefore say that it must be, and we would not push it off, because which happened first? What happened first was they were already Zavim, and so since we never pushed the first thing off, we're not going to allow them to continue.
But according to Ula's statement that we brought yesterday, one we didn't say, we said that the Zav isn't really Tameh. He's just waiting for Erev
You mean Balkari, the Balkari,
right?
Yeah, and you're right. But remember that we've also seen.
Oh, we're not saying that's not a Zav. The Balkari is not a Zav then.
Correct. The Balkari is not a Zav. Balkari is not a Zav. Balkari, different category, and
Right.
a Zav has to wait a full 7 days in order to be allowed, and so it's a much stricter thing. But the point is that just to help with the analogy, remember that somebody who's Tamei Mace, if the entire community is Tamei Mace, so they also have to wait 7 days. So the point is that we're allowing somebody who might otherwise have to wait 7 days to still go in and do and still participate in the Korban Pesach. And we say, and yet we say for Zav, we're not going to say it, even if it's a majority Zav. Because again, if it's a majority Zav, we would not allow it in an ordinary case either.
So if the entire community were Zavim or Zavot,
everybody would end up having
then
to
they have to
bring a
wait the
korban
Pesach
Pesach
Sheni. Then they would
That's
have to
correct.
wait the
That's
Pesach
correct.
Sheni.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
Is
So-
that the halacha?
Yes, that's the halacha. That's the halacha. So miklal de tarbayus. So what do we see from all of this? We see that both Abaye and Rava agree. So now the Gemara does not tell us whether we follow Abaye or Rava here. It doesn't say whether they would end up saying, they would end up allowing all of this to happen. Indeed, there isn't even a halachic statement associated with this in the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. So I don't know exactly how we would paskin, but the bottom line is, my sense is that even it's not clear that even Rava would say that the halacha should be this way. He was just trying to justify Rav Yosef's logic. But the bottom line is that it's really just a theoretical question. But in any event,
So we don't know then if we know if the entire community is Tamei Mate, then they're allowed to have Korban Pesach.
Correct.
No.
But what happens if they're all Tamei Mate and now also all become Zavim? That's not clear. That's not clear. I don't have the answer for that. My sense is that it would still that you would have to wait for Pesach Sheni, but not clear about that. I have not had a chance to take a look at various commentaries on that question. So miklal de tarvayo, but what we can determine, even though we can't necessarily tell with respect to the halacha who we follow, but we can say something about what both Abaye and Rava think. Miklal de tarvayo svira lahu tuma dechuya hui b'tzibur. That when we say that you're allowed, that the entire community, if they're Tamei Mace, are allowed to bring a Korban Pesach, they both agree with the concept of Dechuya, because they both distinguished the case of Tamei Mace from the case of the Mitzorah. When it comes to the Mitzorah, that's a true absolute permission. But when it comes to the case of Tumas Mace, that's a Dechuya. And so once you push off, it doesn't necessarily mean that the same thing would happen in another situation. And so as a result, you have that debate between whether Dechuya is on some level stronger, like Rava says, or weaker, like Abaye says. Okay, so now we pause and we go back to Ula's first point. Ula's first point, again, was partial entry into a space is like entry by one's whole body, and you would potentially be subject to kares. So let's say the following is a support for Ula's statement. Lema Misayele. Let's say that this is a proof, and Rashi tells us Lema Misayele, second narrow line, La'ula, for Ula, to Amr Bia B'miktas Shma Bia, that says that if you come in a little bit, it's as if you came in completely. Kol Smichas Shahayusham. So this is going to be a brisa that's going to discuss the obligation to do smicha, to put your hands on an animal, lean on the animal before you offer it as a sacrifice. So when we say that there is requirement for smicha in the Torah and for all the korbanos or all the large animal korbanos, korei aleihen ani techav l'smicha shchita, that I can say that for all of them, except with one exception, which we're about to say, you need to connect immediately after the leaning. That's when you have the slaughtering. Chutz mizu, with the exception of this case, and Rashi tells us chutz mizu, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 and 5 lines into the narrow lines on Lamed Gimel Lamed Av, chutz mizu shel asham mitzora. The case of an asham of a mitzora is the one exception. Shahaisa b'shar nikanor, because we know that the mitzora on the day of his, when he's a mechusar kapara and he's all that he needs to do is bring the sacrifices so that he can be fully done with his being a mitzora. So he's going to be standing at the gate of Nikanor, and that's where he's going to do the smicha. She'em mitzora yachol l'kanesham, because the mitzora is not allowed to go into the azara ad shemazin alav midam chataso midam hashemo, until they put on him the blood of his sin offering and his asham. Now, technically, and Rashi points this out, ad shemazin alav midam chataso. It's it's a continued down. It's about halfway down into the narrow lines, maybe a little less. Lo alav mamish. They don't actually put both of these bloods on him, literally. Kamar she'ein nosin al bahonos elam midam ha'asham, because only the asham, the asham mitzora, is going to be put on the mitzora. The blood of the chatas is only put on the altar. Ela shezorkin bishvilo dam chataso v'dam ashamo. But the blood of both his asham and his sin offering are both going to be sprinkled on his behalf. And that's what we really mean. So again, there are two sacrifices that he makes: a sin offering that involves two birds, one that's going to fly away, one that's going to be killed, and its blood is going to be put on the mizbeach and on that bird that flies away. And then there's the asham, which is then that blood from that is going to be put on his ear, his thumb, and his big toe, and also on the mizbeach. So, okay.
Does it have to be his asham? It seems there's a bit of a chronological problem here, because he can't go in there and he has to stand outside. So suppose they shecht another animal for someone else, or the court.
Oh no, it has to be his. It has to be his asham that they put the blood on. You can't put the blood from somebody else. No, that doesn't work. So the point is that they need to do that. So the point is, right? The amra bia mixas loshma bia. Now, if you say that Ula, that you disagree with Ula, and you say that Ula's wrong and coming in a little bit is not considered coming in completely. La'ayil yadei v'lismoch. Let him stick in his hands, right? The gate of Nicanor is 10 amos wide, and it's in the center of the courtyard, meaning you look straight from it right into the Kodesh, and the point is that the middle of the gate of Nicanor is right along the line of the Mizbeach. So the Mizbeach is all in the south part of the courtyard, and from the Mizbeach and the entire area to the north of the Mizbeach, all the way from the gate all the way to the Kodesh is called the north of the Mizbeach, and we'll see that's Rebbe's view, but we saw that a few days ago as well. But that's Rebbe's view, and so all of that can be used to slaughter the animal. And so, as a result, let the Mitzorah stand in the right hand 5 amos of the gate, stick his hands in, because we just said that let's suppose that Bia B'Mikzas is Lo Shma Bia. Let him li'ayol yadeh v'lismo. Let him stick his hands into that part of the courtyard and put his hands down on it. As Rashi tells us, li'ayol yadeh litoch. This is now from the bottom of the narrow lines in Rashi. It's 9, 12, about 15 lines up. Li'ayol yadeh litoch Pesach. Let him stick his hands into the doorway. V'lismoch, and put his weight on the and do the smicha, put his weight on the animal, v'lishkote etzel hapesach, and then they can slaughter the animal right there next to the doorway. Daha kol hapsachim shahayusham rachban eser amos. The gates of the Nicanor were 10 amos wide, v'chamesh mahen b'tzafon, and 5 of them were considered the northern part of the courtyard. And of course, 5 of them were in the south. Pesach mechuvan keneged pescho shel heichal. That the gate of Nicanor was right opposite the entrance to the heichal, to the Kodesh, be'emtza ha'azara, in the middle of the courtyard, meaning middle from an east-west perspective. V'yachol lishchot, and you can do the shechita there. Lifnei tzafono shel pesach dehavile tzafon, because that is considered the north, and you need to slaughter. And asham is part of the kodshe kodshim, and as a result needs to be slaughtered in the north. And so as a result, that should be sufficient. The kasalka daitek, and Rashi now helps us understand how we're going to respond to this question, because what are we thinking right now? Rebbe, we're assuming that this Mishnah is according to Rebbe Yehuda Hanasi. The Amar Kol Safon Ha'azara Kasher L'Shchita L'Shchitas Kodshim, because Rebbe says that the entire north part of the courtyard is all kosher for slaughtering holy sacrifices. V'av tzafon sheb'makom drisas raglei kohanim b'Yisrael. Even the 22 amos, there are 22 amos from the door of Nicanor, from the gate of Nicanor, to the Mizbeach, to the wall of the Mizbeach. The first 11 of those amos are where Yisraelim can go, where regular Jews can go. The next 11 amos are where the Kohanim go. So, but that's 22 amos, and even in that first 22 amos, as long as you're on the north side of the, as long as you're north of the, north of the, I think I said east-west before, saying that it was in the middle east-west. It was the middle north-south. I apologize for that mistake, so I'm correcting that now. But the point is that when you go from the middle of the gate of Nicanor all the way to the right, that is all north of the Mizbeach, and all of that, according to Rebbe Yehuda Hanasi, is a permitted place for doing shchita, k'da amar la'el, as we saw earlier in this Masechet, and as we've seen other times as well. So the bottom line.
Well, what are the shitot of the other rabbanim?
Well, we're going to get to the main other shita, because that's what we're going to say right now. So let's give you the main other shita. I don't remember the name of the person who has the third view, but I can tell you what his viewpoint was. Amar Rabbi Yosef Hamani Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. This viewpoint is not actually Rebbe. It's Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. And because what does he say? Da'amar meirachek tzafon. That when we say north, we mean some distance from the gate of Nicanor, as Rashi tells us, third line from the end of the from the end of the narrow lines of Rashi. Meirachek tzafon hakosher l'shchitas kodshe kodshim. The north that is the place where you're allowed to slaughter the kodshe kodshim, rachok min haPesach, yoter mikaf beis amos. It's further than 22 amos from the doorway, because makom drisas Yisrael umakom drisas Kohanim, because the first 22 amos are the place where the Kohanim and the Israelim are allowed to walk. The kol achas mehen yud aleph amma. Each of them are 11 amos wide. So you have an 11 amma wide strip for the Yisraelim, then an 11 amma strip for the Kohanim, the Mesechas Midos, as we have in Mesechas Midos. The Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and it's like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, who says, the Amar, Ezehut Tzafon, what's considered north? Mikir Mizbeach va'ad Kotel HaZarah. It's only the area right opposite the altar. So only the area that's the width of the altar, from the altar all the way to the northern wall of the courtyard, that is the only space that is where you can do the shechita.
Isn't that beyond 11? Isn't that beyond the 11 amot?
Yes, it's beyond the 22 amot.
How can the Metzora even put smicha on the animal? He can't reach that far unless he has long arms.
That's exactly right.
He needs long arms. Like Batya.
That's exactly right. He can't do that reaching. And that's why, even though this brisa may be consistent with the concept that bia b'mitzvahs lo shma bia, that even though the author of this brisa may say that if you go in a little bit, it's okay. You're not gone in until you've put your head and most of your body in. But you still aren't going to be able to sacrifice the Metzora's Asham immediately. You're going to have to wait some time, because he's going to need to put his hands on the animal in one location, and you're going to then need to move the animal to the special location. And that's why there's going to be a delay.
He can't go with that animal, can he?
Correct. No, he cannot go with that animal.
So he's not at the point of shechita then. He's only with the smicha near the doorway. Then you got to move the animal. Are you allowed
That's
to
exactly
do that?
right. And that's how come this brisa says, right? What we thought was this brisa proved Ula's point that bia b'mikzas shma bia, but now we can explain that no, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you go in a little bit, it's like you go in the whole way, because you can't possibly go reach your hands in 22 amos to get to the right area. So we're going to have to move the animal. And so as a result, we are going to have some delay between when they did the smicha and when they did the shechita. All right. And so let's continue on in the Rashi. We're now in the third wide line of Rashi. Right. Va'ad kozal hazara keneged safono shel mizbeach v'sulo, and no other area. Hilchach tzarich lahachziro b'tzafon v'hamizbeach. Therefore, we are going to have to return the animal to the northern side of the mizbeach. V'leika tafach l'smicha shchita, and it's not possible to connect and do the smicha right after to do the shchita right after the smicha, and so that shows that in fact we're going to have a delay, even though we might believe that bias b'mitzvahs lo shma bia. So Rav Yosef has explained how come we don't have to say that this brisa that we just quoted that says that there must be a delay is not a support of Ula, because in our original read, let the guy put his hands in, put the rest on the animal, and then do the shechita right there in the doorway, and everything would work. So the fact that we don't say that, doesn't that show that bias b'mitzvah shma bia? And the answer is no. We don't say that, because even if he were to do that, you'd still have to move the animal, because we're following the position. This price is following the position of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara now asks, "V'li aved pishpeish." Let him make let's just make a pishpeish. And what's a pishpeish? Rashi explains that let's put a door right opposite the mizbeach on the northern wall of the courtyard, and let's let the person stick their hands in there and do the smicha. So Abaye v'Rabba de Amre Tarbaya. Well, Abaye and Rabba immediately respond. Hakol quoting a pasuk from Divrei Hayamim, Aleph Parakov Chet pasuk Yutet. Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem alai haskil kol melachot hatavnid. It is all in writing, as it was elucidated to me from the hand of Hashem, all the works of the plan. This is David HaMelech, I believe, speaking, and he's saying that the entire structure of the Beis Hamikdash is based on God's telling us. So we don't have the right to just move doors around. Ika da Amri. Alternatively, we can give a completely different answer to this question. So again, our question is doesn't this brisa prove Ula? No, Amar of Yosef, Kol Hasomech Rusho Berubo Machnis. No. In order to do smicha, you need to have your majority of your body over the animal. You need to have your head over the animal. You need to have a majority of your body over the animal because we need all of your weight to go on. And so as a result, it isn't possible to do smicha by sticking in just your hands. So you need to put all of your body in. And once you put all of your body in, we're no longer in the case of Bia b'miktsas shma bia. We're in the case of Bia b'rosho v'rubo. And rosho v'rubo, everybody agrees that that's shmei bia. That's certainly considered entering completely. And so therefore, it's not going to be possible to do the leaning immediately. And so as a result, this could be even according to Rebbe. And my timer, what's the reason?
Oh, no, what do you mean you can't? That is doing the leaning immediately. You mean you can't do the smicha immediately?
I'm sorry, you can't do the leaning and the smicha and then do the shchita right thereafter.
Right.
Because you can't, because the Mitzorah can't put his whole body into the Azara. So even though maybe we could slaughter the animal right there at the gate, we still are going to need to move the animal because the animal needs to be outside the gate, or at least in the gateway, if to the extent that because the gateway is not considered part of the Azara, at least in the gateway for the person to do the smicha, because he needs to do smicha with his entire body. And my timer, why do you need your entire body? Because we need somebody to do smicha with all his might. You can't just pet the animal when you're doing the smicha. The idea of smicha, or concept that at least my understanding of smicha, is that we're effectively transferring ourselves into this animal, that we recognize that we are the ones that need to be sacrificed, that we are the ones that are deserving of punishment, especially when it comes to a chatas, that we're the ones that are deserving of punishment, and as a result, but it's the animal that's been going instead of us. Hilkach lo asher. So as a result, it's not possible. And Rashi explains, Amar of Yosef, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the wide lines of Rashi from the top of the wide lines. It's 11 or 12 lines down. Amar of Yosef laolam Rebbe. Really, we could say it's Rebbe. V'deka amrat liol lismo kol hasomech. And so why don't we say let the guy just put his hands in? And the answer is because everybody who does the leaning needs to use rosho v'rubo, needs to use their entire body. Okay, so my kasavar, let's take a quick analysis of this brisa, because what does the brisa say? Right, the brisa says that we need to have smicha followed by shchita, and we need smicha for the mitzorah. So ikasavar smichas asham mitzorah deoraisa. If we're going to say that the commandment for doing smicha for a korban asham mitzorah is a biblical requirement, the techav l'smicha shchita deoraisa, and you tell me that the immediacy, the need to immediately following the smicha to do the slaughtering. So leyo v'lismach lehenja. The Torah is telling us that we need to do these two things. So let the guy go into the courtyard. After all, we're letting him stick his fingers into the courtyard. De Rachmana Amar. After all, the Torah is telling us that we need to do two things. We need smicha on the on the asham by the mitzora, and we need to do the slaughtering right after the smicha. So let's let him do it. Let him do it. Why not? Let him do it. So Amar Rav Ada Bar Masna, he explains, Gzeira Shema Yarbibsios. No, it's a rabbinic decree that we don't want, we were worried about him taking extra steps. We don't want him to accidentally go in the wrong direction. As Rashi says, Shema Yarbibsios. We're now from the bottom of the wide lines in Rashi, 3, 6, 9, 12 lines up. La'achar shesamach, after he does the smicha, im yikanes psia letzad panim, he now has to get out, right? So on his way in, he's fulfilling a mitzvah. So as a result, that's why we're focusing on his way out. On his way out, he now has an obligation to get out of there as soon as possible. But if he goes in even a little bit further, Lutzad panim yoter mishahayad tzarich. If he goes in a little further than he needed to, nimsa anush kares. He's going to be punished with kares. We don't want to set that up. We want to prevent that from happening. And so as a result, that's why rabbinically we won't let it happen.
But haven't we established that via b'miktzat dame bia? Haven't we established that yet or not?
No, we have not. That's Ula's position,
right?
But we need, but our baraisa isn't clear as to which position it is. It could be in either direction. And the bottom line is though, but the question is once you say that there's a biblical requirement to do both the entry and the both the smicha and do the smicha right next to the slaughtering, why not let the mitzora in? After all, he's only a mechusar kapara. Let him in. So the answer number one is we're worried. Yeah, we could have, and biblically we might have let him go in, but we're so worried about him becoming liable for something that would be subject to kares that we say no, don't do it.
But in other cases, we have milavim. People that are milavim, they walk with him. They
walk with him. Yeah, it's a good question. Why not just have that?
You have people.
Maybe that's part of the reason why we're going to give another answer. Ika de Amri, Amar of Adabar Masna. Others say smichas asham mitzora de oraisa. Now the smicha on the animal, that's de oraisa. B'techav l'schicha shmita lab de oraisa. But the requirement to do the slaughter right thereafter, that's not actually biblical. One second, meisvei v'samach v'shachat. We have the concept. We have a hekesh between doing smicha and doing slaughtering, and we say mas smicha b'tahorin af shchita b'tahorin. We say that you have to be tahor to do smicha, and therefore you have to be tahor to do shchita. V'i amrat lavdo raisa. And if you tell me that the obligation to do smicha is not on this animal is not biblical, so b'tamei nami mishkachasla. So then we should be able to find a way for a tame person to do smicha, because after all, let the tame person, lean from outside the temple courtyard, and then have the offerings led into the courtyard to be slaughtered. So, let him do the leaning outside, and then he can and then we can bring the animal in. So the point is that just like we're allowing this smicha to happen at a distance from the shchita, so let a tame person do the same thing. He can be tame mace. He can stand on harabayas, because you can be on harabayas, you just can't go into the azara if you're tame mace, and then everything will work out. And so why not let him be tame and do the smicha, and just not do the smicha next to the shchita? We can, just like we're not doing the smicha next to the shchita for this mitzora, we can do the same thing for somebody who's tame. So as a result,
but aren't we saying this, Maman of Shach? Aren't we saying that this person isn't really tamei? He just needs to mechusa kapara. So if he's not tamei, then what's the issue of the smicha, the writer or not the writer? If we're allowing him because he's not really tamei to
No,
do to do the to smicha, then allow him to be close to the shechita. But if we say he is tamei because he hasn't done mechusar kapara, if we say he is tamei and we're allowing him to do it betuma, then allow him to do the shechita betuma also.
So a couple things. So one is that a mechusar kapara, we definitely treat them as if they're still tamei of whatever level of tuma that they had.
Sort of.
Well, yes. I mean, not completely because they don't actually transfer that tumor, but they are considered tummy. There you have to do the same protections that they would have otherwise. So the point is that if we're allowing this mechusar kapara to do the smicha outside the azara and then bring the animal in, imagine the same situation, but now he also is tamei mace. So let him also do the same thing. We can say, once we're moderate for the case where now he becomes tamei mace that morning. So let him do the same situation. He's allowed to be in that same exact location. So allow him to also do the smicha. He could be there just as, even though he's now tamei mace, he can be in that location. So once we're bringing the animal out to him for him to do the smicha of the asham, let him do the smicha of the asham, even though he's now tamei mace. And so the bottom line is that because of that, we're reversing what Rav Adabar Masna said. Ela Epo. Smichas asham mitzora labdo raisa. Really, the smicha is not a biblical requirement when it comes to the asham mitzora. Other korbanot, of course, it's a biblical requirement, but for smicha of asham mitzora, that's not biblically required. But the general requirement, the broader requirement of having smicha and shchita be right next to each other, deoraisa, that is biblical. And last Rashi on Lama Gimel and Aleph, smichas asham mitzora lab deoraisa, kasavar she'eno beklal ashamos, because it's not part of the other ashamos that where we in the general rule of ashamos. Shaharei eno ba el lahakshir. This is that the asham mitzora is only coming in order to enable this person to now once again eat korbanot. It is not coming for any other purpose. It's not coming to make him tahor or to give him some kind of redemption or purification or atonement. So Ravina Amar. So now we go back. So 1 second. So now yesterday we challenged Ula's statement from a discussion of a Mitzorah on his 8th day who became a Baal Keri.
1 second. The mikveh here, where we have samach v'shachat mas smicha b'tahorim. The Gemara doesn't explicitly say here that this refers to tamei mate. Doesn't, but are we referring to something else? Because I'm looking Rashi. I don't see the word tamei mate. It says b'tahorim, v'af shchita b'tahorim, right? And then
yes. Well, I mean, the simplest understanding is it's tumas mace, but it could also be tuma of a sheretz. Not necessarily. I didn't mean to be dafka. It was lav dafka. It could be tumas of a sheretz also.
I was thinking that we were referring to.
I'm sorry. Can we? We got to get otherwise we're not going to finish the daf because we're already
okay. All right.
So now the point is yesterday we challenged Ula's statement from a discussion of a Mitzorah on his 8th day who became a Baal Keri, right? So the point is that, and yet we allowed him, but the question was based on the question assumed that partial entry of either a Mitzorah or a Baal Keri into the courtyard would be subject to kares. And so what we were saying is, yes, because we're going to permit in one situation, we're going to permit in another situation. So now the Gemara offers an alternative approach that effectively eliminates that question. So Ravina Amar, Inyan Malkus Inmar, it's only for Malkus. You're not also subject to kares if you put partial body into the azara. So even though we're going to say partial entry is like full entry, it's not really like full entry. Partial entry is like full entry, but you're only subject to lashes. You're not going to be also subject to kares. Kiasa Ravin Rabbi Abahu. When Ravin came, and he said in the name of Rabbi Abahu a completely different suggestion. It has nothing. Now we're going to talk about Reish Lakish's statement, or the statement of Ula in the name of Reish Lakish. Le'inyan tamei shenaga b'kodesh itmar. He was not even talking about partial entry. He was talking about touching sacrificial food, touching kodesh. De itmar, as it said, Tamei shenaga b'kodesh, Reish Lakish omer loka, Rabbi Yochanan omer ena loka. Reish Lakish says that that person gets lashes, and it has nothing to do with kares. It has nothing to do with entry at all. Reish Lakish omer loka. Why does Reish Lakish say that you get lashes? Because kodesh lo tiga, because of the pasuk in the beginning of Parshas Tazria that's talking about a woman who gave birth, that she's not allowed to touch anything holy. So the Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Eino, and so as a result, she can't touch Kodesh. She can't touch any food that's holy. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Eino Loka. No, she doesn't get lashes for touching a sacrificial food. Hahu b'truma ksiv. That verse is talking about truma from its greater context. Rabbi Yochanan understands that that verse is talking about truma. The Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish says, "Hi kra." 1 second. So Reish Lakish, "Hi kra lahachi hudasa." 1 second. You're telling me because Kodesh Lotiga is telling us that there's a prohibition of touching sacrificial food. That's not true. From that pasuk of in the beginning of in Perek Yud Bet pasuk Zayin of Perek Yud Bet pasuk. Dalit, it may be pasuk Dalit of at the beginning of Parshas Tazria. You're telling me that that's teaching us the rule about not touching Kodesh? No, that's not for that purpose. Is that pasuk coming to teach us about the law of not touching holy objects, of holy sacrifices? Haimi baile azhara la'ochel basar kodesh. Reish Lakish uses that as a verse to tell us a warning about not eating sacrificial meat, which would then be sub de'itmar, because we have the statement azhara la'ochel basar kodesh minayin. Where do we get the warning for not eating sacrificial meat? And Reish Lakish Amar b'kol kodesh lo tiga, citing that same verse. And we can't use one verse to teach us two things, although we'll see how Reish Lakish does so in a moment. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no, Tani Bardala, the Brisa taught, Bardala taught a Brisa, Asya tumaso mibias kot mikdash. Nah, it's not from that pasuk. It's a Gzereshava. We have a Gzereshava of the word tumaso. In one location, it says tumaso regarding kares for eating sacrificial food while tameh, and in another place it says kares for entering the Beis Hamikdash while tameh. The first one is in Vayikra Perek Zayin Pasuk Kaf, and the second one is Bamidbar Perek Yutet Pasuk Yud Gimel in Parshas Para. So the point is Malahalan Anash v'Hizir, and this Gzeir Shava tells us that just as we have when it comes to going into the Beis Hamikdash while Tameh, both a warning and a punishment, namely Kares, Avkan, Anish v'Hizir. So too, Rabbi Yochanan will say, we have a Gzeir Shava, and so here too, we have a punishment and a warning. But the bottom line is that we see from this statement, this debate between Reish Lakish and Yochanan, that Reish Lakish is using the language of B'kol Kodesh Lo Tiga to tell us that that's a warning against eating sacrificial food while tameh, not a warning about touching sacrificial food while tameh. So the Gemara answers, tameh shenaga b'kodesh mid'apka rachmana b'lashon negia. No. The point is we actually can learn both. We learn the fact that you can't touch the sacrificial food because the language of the verse involves touching. B'kol kodesh lo tiga. She's not allowed to touch anything kodesh. So even though the context, we use that context to say that really, although the language was used in connection with touching, it really refers to eating. But so therefore, azhara la'ochel, but it still can be a warning for eating because that's the greater context of the verse. Mid'idkish kodesh lemikdash, because right next to that it says b'kodesh b'kol kodesh lo tiga ubamikdash lo tavo ve'el hamikdash lo tavo. So the point is that juxtaposition of not going into the mikdash and not eating kodesh, that is what does exactly what Rabbi Yochanan does. Rabbi Yochanan does it with the Gzeira Shava. Reish Lakish does it with the juxtaposition in the pasuk in Perek Yud Bet, pasuk Dalid of Vayikra, the juxtaposition of touching the Kodesh, which we say is really referring to eating and coming into the Mikdash. And so as a result, both of them. So now what we see is that although when it comes to touching something that's Kodesh, you're only going to be subject to lashes. But when it comes to eating something Kodesh or going into the Beis Hamikdash when you're Tameh, in both of those cases, not only are you subject to lashes, but you're subject to Pares.
It sounds a little like the discussion in this week's Torah portion, the Nachash with Adam V'Chava.
Yes, I hear you. 100%. That's a nice, we can call it a Daf Yomi coincidence that we're talking about touching and eating, and whether is touching also covered in eating or not. And so I encourage you to expand on that drush. That I like that drush very much. But we're not done with the debate between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. But for the continuation of that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Everybody, good Shabbos all.
Cheers.
All right. Have a great Shabbos.
Good job.